So rhetoric is the foundation of democracy, the foundation of a participatory society, as we've mentioned many times, and we'll be discussing that here today, rhetoric and persuasion and triadic history. Who are the three that we are talking about? We're talking about the sophists, the traveling teachers of rhetoric, Socrates and his favorite student Plato, who really tried to establish an objective notion of reality. And then finally, Aristotle. And so rhetoric and persuasion and triadic history, the sophists, Socrates and Plato, and Aristotle are the three main groups that we talk about here as we establish rhetoric and communication in the public sphere as the foundation of a participatory society where everybody has a voice and all voices should be heard because they are all political in some way and lead us into the future. Let's think about where persuasion is visible. And so, like I said, class, CO 210 and the general public as well, and CO 350, if you're listening as well. I've asked you to respond to questions. And so a question might be, where do you see persuasion? Where is persuasion visible in your everyday life? Advertising is an obvious example, but where do you see advertising? How do these advertisements affect you and reach you in your daily lives? And so that's an example of a question. I've asked you to answer 5 of them. I'll ask at least 5 questions today. And so please email me and respond to 5 questions throughout this whole lockdown situation. And you will be up to speed in class dynamics and proceedings. And so if you missed 1 or 2, please, you can respond to multiple questions that I pose in one lecture. And so you can respond to 3 questions today if you happen to be able to tune in to today's lecture. And so where do see persuasion in everyday life? The sophists, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And so the sophists, the traveling teachers of rhetoric, who really establish how rhetoric functions in a participatory society. And so they outline that speaking doesn't just reflect a reality that lies waiting for us to describe it, but it brings a certain reality into fruition. And so what we call things and the labels that we give the material world is reflected in the meaning of those words. And so every word has a value, and that value makes us look at the material world in specific and particular ways. And so we're thinking about persuasion. How is the subject matter or the topic that you are looking at perceived in everyday life? And so the discourse is how people talk about any given subject. And so a question might be, how does society, how do your friends, how does the general public, your family, view the subject that you are thinking about, talking about for our persuasive speech? Before this is a persuasive or intent, it's also just a general subject matter. And so I encourage you, talk to some friends about this subject and see how they feel about the topic. And so any given topic has a discourse that surrounds it. So think of a topic right now. Any topic. How do people think about this subject? How do people talk about this subject? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about this topic? Soccer, democracy, freedom, hope, whales, elephants, trees, rats. The list goes on. All of those topics, there's a discourse surrounding those topics. What were some of the words and ideas that came to your mind when you heard those words? And so the sophists, traveling teachers of rhetoric, the most important thing for us here is that they really established a subjective way of looking at society. And so the sophists, because they traveled around so much, And that, in relation to someone like Socrates, who never left Athens, they really developed a cultural perspective. And so, a subjective perspective that is based on your particular environment, the people that you're around, and the world that you exist in. And so, just go down the road to the next street or across town to another neighborhood, to another state or country, and you can see that people look at the same world in vastly different ways. And so the sophists were some of the first to give us this notion that the truth is elusive and subjective. And it's defined by the words we use to describe it. And so our next, and I'll move through these somewhat quickly. We're kind of recapping here the history of rhetoric in relation to communication. We're starting to transition into producing our own forms of knowledge now. So now you will comment on the society that we live in through your own expressive faculties with our persuasion and perception speech. And so Socrates and Plato, of course, give us that dialectical tension between any two entities when they are communicating. Every time you communicate with somebody, there's a little bit of tension, a little bit of give and take. They agree with you, they don't agree with you. They understand you, they need some clarification, right? Even the fact that they hear you, are you listening? And so we constantly give feedback, letting other people know that we are in fact listening and receiving that there is a message, not to mention what that message might actually be. And Socrates and Plato, Socrates is famous for the Socratic method or dialectical tension. And so the Socratic method is based on dialogue, two entities uncovering and trying to know what the situation is. Even if it's something as objective as the temperature in the room, might have to ask, is it hot in here or is it just me? Who's the best basketball player of all time? Who is the greatest president of all time? What's better, a sandwich or pizza, rice or tacos? What's the best place to visit? What's the best show on Netflix right now? Whatever it is, there is a tension, and you try to uncover a more shared objective, a more shared understanding of the truth. Now, when it's something a little bit more important like freedom, liberty, or hope, or justice, or love, then these conversations get a lot more complicated. And as a society, talking about that discourse, talking about reality, which we might call a discourse, it's through dialectical tension, we uncover the world that we all think we exist in. And so the Socratic method from Socrates and Plato, based on the dialectical tension that is created through dialogue and the uncovering of a shared reality. Now, when you bring it into Aristotle, Aristotle really etches out how this functions in a participatory society, where our notions of justice and truth and liberty are established through these very important discussions. And so if you think you're just having a discussion, or you're just saying something to say it, or you're online just being funny, or you're even trolling, right? Not that these are negative things, these in fact are very important because they etch out and they interpret the society that we live in. So, epidectic rhetoric. Epidectic rhetoric, strange word, Greek word meaning display. Epidectic rhetoric, how we display our values. And so every day we are communicating, and in doing so, we are displaying our values. Epidectic rhetoric means to praise or blame certain societal values. And so, in doing so, you are praising some aspects of life and devaluing other aspects of life. Perception. We talked about perception. You select something to look at, and you do that subconsciously almost. If you're looking at this screen right now, you might be looking at the words in the background. I apologize, they're hard to see. Some of my books and objects that I have on my desk. You might be looking at the image on the screen of the words, or even some of the business down here with the computer that seems to be in the background. But we are all selecting what you choose to look at. We all don't look at the same thing, and we don't even really consciously choose. We just select things. Things jump out at us. And so initially, I've asked you to think about a topic of discussion here for our persuasive speech, and do not think about its interpretation or its organization. So remember, selection, organization, and then interpretation. And so interpretation is what we finally want at the end of our speech, or stated in the beginning actually of the speech, but at the end of our research process is our persuasive intent. And so our rhetorical intent. This comes at the end of the perception process. Remember, select, do some research. Quintilian, the Roman orator, said, a good rhetorician is the good person speaking well. What does that really mean? It means that the rhetorician has done the dialectical work and attempted to understand both sides of the argument. Therefore, you have credibility. And so the good person speaking well, through that dialectical tension, you start to organize. And so organize your persuasive speech and think about what are the two opposing sides. And there's always more than one, and many more than two often, of any issue in society. And so after you've done the dialectical tension and the perception process, we might call then you come to the rhetorical intent. And so this is what is most important here after the research, is picking a stance, letting us know as a persuasive speech what you stand for, what you believe in, what ideas and values you are trying to uphold. And remember, this is only a speech, and so it doesn't have to be the closest thing to your heart. You don't have to be married to the subject, but you do have to argue in earnest. If you were to take debate or be in the debate club or engage in a formal debate, oftentimes for those assignments, you just are given a stance, and then you have to argue for either stance. The idea there is that you can argue for or against any issue, and we do so in our everyday interactions. And so our rhetorical intent based on a fact, a value, or a policy. Remember, a fact is something that happened, something exists, and something does not exist. A value is something that we uphold, something that we believe is important and we want to celebrate, or something that we devalue and something that we blame. I think this is where a lot of us will ultimately end up, is in a value. A value is somewhat one of the most broad, the broadest of the three here. One of the most serious and that has the most weight is a policy. We believe certain things to be true. We have values out there in society. And then when they become so important, we create a policy and we make laws. And so if you're already at the interpretation phase of the selection of the perception process for a persuasive speech, What is your rhetorical intent? And are you going to base it on a fact? Is it based on a fact, a value, or a policy? So let's feel free to answer one of those questions as we move forward. With our fifth lecture, that means I should be seeing ultimately 5 answers to questions since we've gone into quarantine and online classes. Congratulations, many of you I've seen 4 or 5 from many of you. Ethos, pathos, and logos, of course, kairos and mythos. That's credibility, that's emotional appeals, logic or reasoning, kairos, timing, societal myths. Remember, I asked you a question: what societal myths, what societal beliefs are ingrained in us, or what societal see celebrated in popular discourse or in general discussion? And so a nice question there. And so if you want to respond to that question, you can. Mythos, our societal beliefs. What are some of our societal beliefs for a little bit of quality participation? How do we see these societal beliefs? What are the artifacts? What are the movies, the films, the songs, the events, the public displays that exhibit that these are some of our societal values? Many of these we've learned when we were very young. And so that's a question that you might attend to. Send me an image if you would like quality participation points of how these values are exhibited. A sporting event, for example, exhibits the values of athleticism and teamwork, also the pursuit of excellence. The better team always wins in sports logic, right? And so that's because they played better that day. And that is those are some of the values, some of our societal mythos that are ingrained in us. And an image, a snapshot of a sporting event might give us the understanding that this is one way that the values are communicated to us. And these values constitute some of our mythos. Logos, logic and reasoning. Very important here. What are some of the evidence and the grounds for your claim? A claim is something that we state, an assertion, right? That movie is good. We say that all the time, right? And we expect people to just understand the grounds or the evidence for that claim. Now, this is logic, right? But oftentimes the logic, the reasoning is left out, and we just end up with the phrase or the claim, the assertion. That movie is good. And then we have to go back. Well, that movie is good because. That movie is good because many people saw it. That movie is good because it had a big budget. That movie is good because the actor won an award. That movie is good because. And the list goes on. And all of this is evidence or grounds for the claim. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward with the Toolman model. And really, this is the model of our deliberatory system. Ethos credibility, that good person speaking well, so said Quintilian, is really based on credibility. Somewhat your status and somewhat your experiences and your achievements, but with a speaking situation, it's how much research have you done? How well do you know the subject matter? What are the credibility of the sources that you have cited? And so this all adds to your credibility. How does credibility affect your daily decisions? So another question, you might think about how how ethos affects your daily decisions. I'm gonna do this that day, but instead I did something else, right? Or I was choosing a movie to watch, and I went with this movie. Um, I was going to listen to one podcast, I listened to another one. I was going to buy one bike, car, motorcycle, and I decided to buy another one. Anything, how does the credibility, the ethos, reflect in your decision making? We talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so remember, we went from your base level needs to your most advanced needs. All right. As we see someone here meditating, really self-actualization. Where would we put that? We might put it at the top. Self-actualization, an understanding of your inner self, your own notion of identity, and your ability to become who that is in society. But it also might just be health, right, and wellness. It also might be safety. But exercise and contemplation also goes all the way down to health. And so that's down near at biology or safety, right? If you are completely stressed and you don't have any downtime to take some time and relax, right? Well, that might be a base level need of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so that might be all the way down at biology, which is pretty interesting to think about how we can be achieving both. But we also might be thinking about how we can use Maslow's hierarchy of needs to argue, right? Saying that everybody needs to enjoy yoga and engage in meditation as a leisurely activity, that might be up here. But saying that people need to be free of environments that are so stressful that their biology might be in danger, and something like taking time out and meditation is that important, well, then now that becomes a very important need for society. As we think about ourselves, think about your identity, think about the way you're perceiving the outside world, and then start to think about an issue or topic. As you look at that topic, start to think about the discourse, how people talk about this subject matter, how people talk about it, whatever it is, university, yoga, hotels, air flights, flowers, records, the technology, the list goes on. And then also, let's think about ourselves and how we are perceiving this world and where we fall on any given subject or any given issue. Then start to move towards developing a persuasive intent. Here's a question. How are your needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs being fulfilled? And so if you are looking at biology, how are your biological needs being met? How are your safety needs being met? If you're up here, how are your self-esteem, love, or self-actualization needs being met in different ways? So take a look at the world around you. Think about some of your needs and wants, and then connect that to one of those levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Thank you for staying and thank you for tuning in and continuing on here. CO 210, CO 350, and general public. Hope we're all doing well. So remember, we are looking at our outline and we are able to pick and choose from some of our organizational structures that are on this outline. And so really, persuasion is an interesting beast. Information is a little bit straightforward, right? We get information, the more information we get, the merrier. We get to decide if that information is credible, if we listen to it, if it's relevant to our lives or not. But the more information we have, oftentimes the better off we are. Not so true with persuasion. Persuasion, if this is your goal, right, and you want to believe that the claim is true or not, persuasion can take you this way into the negative. It could take you this way into the positive while you are speaking, right? And then ultimately you want to end, right, with the audience having understood and having comprehended, one, but number two, having them believe that what you say is accurate or truthful. And so let's pick and choose from our organizational structures that are on our handout. We talked about the perception process, and so that is also an organizational structure. You can take us through selection, organization, interpretation. The Toolman model that we are looking at here, motivated sequence pattern, ethos, pathos, logos. And then we'll talk a little bit more about inductive and deductive reasoning. And so the Toolman model, you can pick and choose from the Toolman model and the motivated sequence pattern. The Toolman model is claim, grounds, warrant, qualifier, rebuttal. A claim is an assertion. Someone make a claim out there in electronic land, online world. Any claim. Pizza is good. Vegetables are good for you. Surfing is fun. Birds are beautiful. Any claim that you want to make, any assertion, and we do this all day long, we make claims, and oftentimes don't do is back that up. And so the court of law functions in this way. Make an assertion, make a claim, back it up with your grounds, so your evidence. Are the grounds evidence for that claim? Warrant. Does the evidence provided warrant that claim? And so, does it warrant that claim? I had a terrible day today. Why did you have a terrible day? Well, it was raining. And so, does that warrant you having a bad day? A little bit, right? We might need a little bit more evidence, more ground. Why else did you have a bad day? Just because it was raining? So every time it rains, you have a terrible day? And so we start to track that down, right? And so the claim, the grounds, the warrant. And so does the grounds warrant the claim? And so we have to oftentimes think about that. The last two are kind of built in. Qualifier, the qualifier, and the rebuttal. And so a qualifier limits the scope of the claim. Right? Well, maybe I didn't have a bad day, but I didn't have a great day. It's hard to have a great day when it's raining for me, right? Not for me personally, but in this hypothetical situation, right? And so I didn't have a terrible day. I had an okay day. And that's a big difference. And everything is a big difference if there's a different word for it, right? And so you qualify your claim. And so watch out for universal statements. Everybody loves pizza. And when you're giving a speech or a persuasive speech, it's a little bit more important. Informational speech is just not necessarily true. but we're not really trying to persuade us. You're just giving us information. So your credibility goes down a little bit. But we're not affected as much as in a persuasive speech. And so everybody loves pizza. That's not true. What is true that's similar to that statement? So let's qualify that statement. Everybody loves pizza. Many people like pizza in the United States. Pizza in the United States is a popular fast food. And so on and so forth. And so instead of saying that everybody loves pizza, pizza is a popular dish, and it still is, right? Might be a way to qualify that claim or that assertion. So let's work on. Think about that when you're speaking in general. What I would like us to do, also a rebuttal, bring us to the rebuttal. So after your speech is over, you don't want to have any reservations left in the minds of your audience. You want to set up the pins as if it was bowling and knock them all down. And then when the audience leaves, there's no way that they can refute what you said. Pizza, everybody loves pizza. Well, I know someone who's lactose intolerant. They can't even eat pizza. I know people that have never even heard of pizza. And so everybody doesn't love pizza. Right? And so if you rebut your claim, then you can attend to any reservations the audience might have. And that's what a rebuttal is, attending to any reservations that your audience might have. And so now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking a sandwich is much better. A burrito is much better. Adobo is much better. Kelaguen is much better than pizza. But pizza is one of the most affordable and accessible dishes around the world, right? And so that's an example of a rebuttal. And so I'm building in a rebuttal. Now you might say to yourself, oh, yeah, I still don't like pizza. And I know people that still don't like pizza, but you make a persuasive argument about how important pizza is and how popular it is, right? And so that's a rebuttal. Let's choose a claim in society, any claim, any that you might think of, and create a rebuttal. And so a comeback to one of these claims. So any given claim in society, let's create a rebuttal for it as a question. Let's remember we are turning in 5, ultimately by this time, questions, answers to questions, I should say. These can be from my lecture. They can also be any question posed in the textbook, and there's questions throughout the text, also in the material at the end of chapters. You can also just talk about a concept, write a brief paragraph about a concept in our textbook. I expect 5 of these at this point. And this will get you up there on your attendance grade. Let's think about the persuasive speech. Remember, we will write an outline for this, and we will turn the outline in. We will record and perform the speech, and ultimately email that to me. And then I encourage us to use note cards during the recording and performing of our speech. And lastly, we will have our Unit 2 test. So I will post the instructions for our Unit 2 post there. Yeah, to respond to a question there. Yes, if you are feeling behind and you haven't been able to tune into lectures, you can respond to 5 questions, and you can use, and I will catch you up to in your attendance grade. And so 3 to 5 sentences as a response to each question. And so here's a good question. A rhetorical intent. What is your rhetorical intent here? And as we think about the claims moving towards the grounds. And so, as I've noted, oftentimes in everyday life, we just make assertions. I would like you to back up some of our assertions. And so if you've said something, the environment needs to be saved. Um, democracy needs to be upheld. This make of car is better than another make, right? Please think about one assertion or claim that you make in everyday life. Tell me that claim, and then tell me 2 forms of evidence that are grounds for that claim. The environment should be safe, right? There's a huge pile of trash circulating in the ocean, and the greenhouse gases are getting high, environmental damage. And there's 2 pieces of evidence, the grounds for that claim. The environment needs to be saved, right? And so 1 claim and 2 forms of evidence that provide reasoning for that claim or that assertion. I also asked you for a rebuttal. Let's move on as we are kind of closing in slightly. Get turned off right on the hour. And so motivated sequence, attention, need, satisfaction, and visualization and action. And so I really like the motivated sequence pattern. It's kind of drawn from sales and marketing. A, B, C. Does anybody know what that means? A, B, C. Anybody? Always be closing. Glenn Ross, a great book or movie about sales. And so always be closing. And so just like any salesperson or marketer understands that you're always closing the deal. And so just like in the informational speech, we might have an attention getter, get the audience's attention. But in the motivated sequence pattern and in the persuasive speech, the attention is ABC. It's always be closing. It's always pointing towards closing the deal, right? If you walk onto a used car lot and the dealer says, "Hey there, looking good today. Wonderful weather we're having." They're not just saying that because it's true. They're saying that because they want to put you in a good mood. They want you to feel positive about everything that day, and especially about making a purchase on an automobile. And so attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and finally action. Need satisfaction. I think this is one of the most important, and I'll write it on the board here. Problem, solution. What is the problem and what is your solution? Now, your solution will be your persuasive intent, but the problem or the need in the motivated sequence pattern should affect all of us and should be important and stated outright. Might be backwards, actually. I guess you can't write in this format here on the board. So the motivated sequence pattern, attention, and then need satisfaction. Need satisfaction is right in the middle of the motivated sequence pattern. And of course, this information is on our handout. What is the problem and what is your solution? Now, if there's no problem, then there's no burden of proof. There's no real notion of the status quo or being up against the status quo. If I was going to try to persuade us that the sky is blue, or if I was going to try to persuade us that running a marathon is difficult, not really much use there of even talking, because most of us believe the sky is blue and that running a marathon is not easy. And so let's go back to that problem, that need, and think about a problem. So look around society and think about what is going on with society. Is society perfect? Is the world we live in perfect? Most people would agree that it's not. And so that means that we have the ability to change certain things about the society and the world that we live in. And so let's find one of these problems. And now let's propose a solution. So let's solve something. And we can solve something with our minds and our words. Indeed, the biggest problems in society, the inequality between ethnicities and races, the inequalities between genders, and other injustices have largely been solved, and they haven't been solved, but they've made progress through words and through our expressive faculties. And so we think about protest movements and we think about ideas about equality and how we discuss those in the public sphere. And so let's think about a problem that your persuasive speech will attend to. And so that says solution and intent, although it might be backwards. Let's, for one of our final questions here, let's write down a problem. Tell me what the problem is that your speech will attend to. Visualization, I really like this one as well. This is where we visualize a world with our solution in place. And so let's also visualize that world. We'll skip out on solution for a moment, but if you want to answer me, what will the world look like when this problem is solved? What will the world look like when we attend to this issue and we all believe as you do? Will the world be a better place? Hopefully it will be a better place, right? It's like the John Lennon song, Imagine. Has anybody ever heard this song? Imagine all the people, right? And so imagine, it's a big exercise, this John Lennon track, in visualization, visualizing a world where there's not as much pain and suffering. And so, beautiful song there by John Lennon, and a nice example of visualization in the motivated sequence pattern. Finally, I really enjoy this one, action. Let's take action. And so you can end your persuasive speech with a call to action. I encourage you now to reduce and reuse and recycle more that you've learned about the problem of the destruction of the environment. And you put in place some of our solutions, and you visualize how beautiful this world can be. Here's what you should do. And so end it strong with action. Motivated sequence pattern: attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and action. The Toolman model: claim, grounds, warrant, qualifier, and rebuttal. Now we can borrow from these. We can use all of them as an outline, as an organizational structure, but we can also pick and choose. If we want the claim and grounds from the Toolman model, the need, satisfaction, and visualization of the motivated sequence pattern, then we can as well. It should just be clear that you have some organizational structure in your outline. And so we'll kind of slow down here. Hopefully everybody's working on their outline. This is where you will let me know that you have done some research here. You have your 3 sources. You'll account for some of your parameters of your speech, like your in-text citations. It should always have an introduction, a body, and conclusion, just like our informational speech. We should get a majority of that information right off the bat in the introduction, and you should go quickly towards your persuasive intent. What do you want us to believe, think, or do differently? We're responding to 5, or I'm asking you to respond to at least 5 questions at this point. Any more correspondence, I put under quality participation points as somewhat of an extra credit here in our online learning process. And of course, Wednesday 5-6, our persuasive speech is due. And so please see those 3 handouts. The handout on the outline, the persuasive speech handout, and the electronic version of our persuasive speech handout. We will also have unit number 2 coming up. I really hope everybody is doing well. I hope we're enjoying our learning process in the online apparatus. I hope we really enjoy our giving our speeches in this format as well. Of course, nobody asked for this, and it would be much better to be in the classroom. But as I heard a wise person say recently, with every crisis comes opportunity. And so we have a little bit of an opportunity to deal with some of these more emerging technologies, and make them a little bit more a part of our everyday life in terms of education. And so let's think about our videos and think about the production of these videos. And I look forward to receiving them on 5-6. At that point, we'll turn towards finishing our Unit 2 test and closing off the semester strong. Please see our announcements on Moodle. Also, just double check your grades as we move forward. And if you have any questions, please email me as we start to finish the semester strong, tie up any loose ends. And so be well, everybody. Be safe, and also engaged in this class and life in general. Have a good one.